I rather object to the term literary Darwinism because it seems like a little like going back to literary Marxism or something like that, setting up a guru whom you have to acknowledge and derive all your validity from. But I think it's so. I just tend to use literature and evolution. It's not very satisfactory, but somebody will come up with a better term someday. Um, Partly to stress the fact that there's so much has been discovered since Darwin in evolutionary thinking, and much of the work that we do is built on very, very recent advances in evolutionary thinking.
The theory of evolution uh, um, has three basic ingredients. Um, Such a simple theory that it can be taught in a couple of minutes. So the first ingredient is variation. Creatures, organisms such as you and I, differ in just about everything that you can measure. The second ingredient is consequences. Those differences make a difference in terms of survival and reproduction, often make a difference. So if you're bigger than me, you can take my stuff or you can kill me outright. If I'm smaller than you, I can survive the winter. You might not. Exactly which differences are important and how they relate to survival and reproduction depends on the environment, the circumstances. So you have differences, you have consequences, and then the third ingredient, kind of a yeast that makes the recipe come to life, is heritability, the fact that offspring resemble their parents. And Darwin didn't know why that resemblance existed, but he did know that it did exist. And when you take those three ingredients together, then you get a inevitable consequence, which is that every generation, the properties of the species are going to be different, and that it will change in the direction of becoming adapted to your environment. So to pick a classic example, if we have moths that vary in their coloration, and some blend into their background more than others, the more conspicuous ones get picked off by predators, so there's differences that make a difference. Heritability means that the next generation of moths will blend into their background more than the previous generation, and over many generations, then the moths become, to blend into their background, they become adapted to their environment. How simple is that? And yet, that becomes the basis for explaining so many aspects of life. The humanities consist of, what are the humanities? If we were to list the activities and subjects associated with the humanities, they would include the arts, uh, so the dance, music, theater, narrative, these activities, certain subject, religion, philosophy, history is sometimes included. So one thing we want to know is, what are these activities? How can we explain them? And one line of reasoning is that these things seem kind of superfluous. That if we're hunting for food, that's easy to explain. If we're looking for mates, that's easy to explain. But if we're telling a story or dancing or decorating a pot, that's hard to explain. So these things superficially appear like puzzles from an evolutionary perspective. As soon as you take culture seriously, then they become essential for culture to exist. So basically they form human groups, they bond people together. Dancing together is a tremendous bonding device. Music is an emotional coordinator. Narrative, of course, is I've already called them our cultural genes. And so these very things that seem superfluous from the standpoint of raw survival and reproduction become essential, part of the anatomy and physiology, as I sometimes call them, and replication machinery of culture. So as soon as we take culture seriously, then all of the activities associated with the humanities all of a sudden become like essential. If we're going to understand our species, then we have to understand these activities. Let me give you a little bit of historical background for evolutionary psychology. I've been already talking about the fact that evolution was restricted to the biological sciences and avoided for most human-related subjects. And an example of that was the publication of Sociobiology by E.O. Wilson in 1975. 1973, the geneticist Theodosis Dobzhansky coined his phrase, "Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution." And that is quoted as a kind of a mantra by evolutionists ever since. That was 1973. In 1975, E.O. Wilson publishes Sociobiology, which is a demonstration of what Dobzhansky was talking about, because what Wilson was saying in sociobiology was that the social behaviors of all creatures, from ants to primates, could be understood with the same theory, the same basic set of theoretical principles. Nothing makes sense about social behavior except in the light of evolution. Well, that was celebrated as a breakthrough, except for that last chapter on humans, which created an uproar. And so that, I think, is a historical event, which is demonstrating this apartheid that I'm talking about, that happy for evolution to take place for the rest of life, but there's some reason why humans are set apart, okay? Well, it wasn't until the 1990s that terms such as evolutionary psychology, evolutionary anthropology, and so on started to gain in usage. Now, evolutionary psychology was originally formulated by Leda Cosmides and John Tooby, and a book called The Adapted Mind came out in 1992, edited by Jerome Barco, Cosmides, and Tooby, which became a kind of a Bible for evolutionary psychology. Now, Tooby and Cosmides had very strong ideas about the way the human mind was organized. And so they set up a polarity, basically. They said in the past we've had the standard social science model, which has become known as the SSSM. And that was this kind of blank slate view of psychology as this infinitely flexible learning ability, okay? They basically said that's wrong. And what's right is that the mind is adapted, has many specific adaptations to specific problems affecting survival and reproduction in the ancestral environment. So we have hundreds and hundreds of specific adaptations for mate choice and cheater detection and so on and so forth. This has become known as massive modularity. So there's no general computer inside our heads. There's just dozens and dozens of special purpose computers, okay? And so this became the original formulation of evolutionary psychology. Very interesting as far as it goes, but what it leaves out is this open-ended character, this flexible character of our species. As it turns out, what's really true is something in between the massive modularity thesis and the SSSM. And so gradually the field has been converging on a very sensible middle ground.